Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2021 Future Flying Forum. I have today a very special guest with me. His name is Captain Kurt Brunches. He is the Managing Director of Aviate and Pilot Strategy at United Airlines. As many of you know, United Airlines is in the middle of a massive pilot hiring spree after placing a record-breaking order at the end of June. In addition to flying those new planes, one of Captain Brunch's responsibilities is also making sure United has a steady stream of pilots for its replacement. As many of you know, there is a mandatory pilot retirement age. So with so much on his plate, we are so grateful that Captain Brunches was able to speak with me here today and talk about this really exciting program. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Jay. Thank you.
Great. Well, let's start with a little overview of the Aviate program. So could you spend a couple of minutes talking about what's the current state of the program? What are you seeing, November 2021, really?
Yeah, so the Aviate program is our pilot development program. So pilots can enter into a program to come to United and get early acceptance to United Airlines. So basically an early conditional job offer to United Airlines. And then they follow a prescribed path to come to us. So we have hundreds and hundreds of participants in this developmental path. So we've selected early, in fact, all the way back to colleges are partners and commercial flight training schools. People that may have only 100 hours or something above 100 hours will join our career development path and move with us to United. We see very vibrant interest in this. We see increasing interest in piloting, commercial piloting, professional piloting as a career for people. So there's a lot of demand on the airline side, certainly at United, and there seems to be a lot of interest that we're tapping into in the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you kind of touched on how have recruitment's been? Have you seen a skyrocket of applications? Are you pretty steady in terms of what you've been seeing over the past couple of years?
Yeah, so we would say that we have a couple lenses on this, and it's increasing. So our traditional applicant pool to United Airlines is in the thousands, and it's up a few thousand from where it was 9 months ago. It probably had diminished because of COVID, just people weren't applying, even though they might have been qualified. So many thousands of pilots standing by in what we call our traditional pilot pool. Then the Aviate program, we have a couple of lenses there. We have over 10,000 subscribers that have subscribed via the website. And we have, we don't release how many participants we have, but we have a very large number, high hundreds of participants that are in the Aviate program that have been selected, have had their interviews, and will not yet have another further interview. So they're done, right? So once they're accepted into the Aviate program, that's the final interview for United Airlines. Then they just track along to us. So hundreds of people.
That's actually some really incredible, and thank you for the insight on that. So, as I alluded to earlier, United has a large need for pilots, and very publicly, you stated, I think, about 10,000 pilots over the next 10 years. So it appears, Aviate's not going to make up the large majority of that, but how are you thinking about scaling up the program? Are you looking at maybe staying steady, increasing your pool size, increasing maybe your training lines, for scaling up?
Yeah. So our hiring rate at the United mainline right now is almost 200 a month, which is the highest that we've ever done. And we've been doing that since about May of this year. And we don't see any reason to diminish that hiring rate anytime soon. So we expect to keep that rate at the United mainline. Our interviews are running almost 100 a week that we're interviewing. And we interview for both traditional and for our Aviate program. The Aviate program, we intend to increase it just as fast as we're able to do. We'll do that in a number of ways. One is by forming new partnerships, and I just hired someone who works directly for me who's in charge of signing new partners. Those partners are universities, so we'll sign more universities. We'll also sign more commercial flight training schools. And that's, those are two very robust sources of pilots that come into the Aviate ecosystem, as we call it. And then, of course, the United Aviate Academy, which I have the logo behind me, we're launching our United Aviate Academy, and we've committed to basically supplying about half of our needs at United in the long term through our Academy pipeline. So the Academy, once again, braggably, we have, I think, 8,400 applicants there right now. And diversity is an important thing for us, and we're happy to brag that 74% of them are diverse. So we have an enormous applicant pool for our United Aviate Academy. We're starting a class of 30 in December. That class is 80% diverse, and diversity defined by women and people of color. So 80% women and people of color. So we're hitting a very, very big population with so many applicants and such great diversity.
Mhm. Yeah, so I want to take a step back just for a second. So, there's like these different ways that you're getting pilots into your ecosystem. So you've got the Aviate Academy, you've got your traditional standard pilot lines. Can you maybe differentiate a little bit for some of our viewers who might not be too keen on how this universe really functions?
Yeah, so yeah, I do want to help people to do that because it can be confusing for how people get involved. Basically, if someone is a very, very experienced pilot already, we still have a channel to United that we call the traditional process. They just send in a resume, they apply through our channels. We use a company called Airline Apps, and they go on there and they can apply to United Airlines. Very qualified means they're flying as professional pilots right now, or they're in the military as skilled aviators. Those people can apply directly to United Airlines. For people who are early in their development, all the way down to 0 hours, the best thing for them to do is to go to unitedaviate.com and kind of figure out our pathway to United. But basically, Aviate will be the way that they'll want to come to United. So the Aviate program. And the program itself has a lot of choice, which makes it a little harder for people to interpret sometimes, but it also helps to create an opportunity for them to build the path that suits them best. So if they want to go to University of North Dakota or Embry-Riddle or Western Michigan, some of our university partners, that's a great option. We have a number of university partners, but they can also go to ATP, the flight school, which is the largest flight school in the US. They're a partner of ours also, and just get into learning to fly separate from an academic preparation. So the website is one of my key pieces of advice, and then just getting going on flying, but doing so if you want to come to United at one of our partner organizations. But referring to the website, subscribing. We have a social media channel also with a lot of followers on Instagram, and we feed information out that way also. So we try to reach out and create a lot of points of contact where people can figure out our program. But to your point, the Aviate program is a place where they get an early job offer from United. They have to have at least a private pilot certificate, typically a commercial or instructor rating, typically a little bit towards that end of the development. But at that point, if they're prepared, they can come in and interview with us and get a job offer, and then just have an obligation to follow the career path to United that we've laid out on our website.
Yeah, I can tell you that's been working. A little known fact about me is I actually grew up in Grand Forks, North Dakota. So UND, I know it. And the number of people since maybe June from UND who have reached out to me and said, "Hey, what do you know about United Aviate?" It's been pretty stellar. So good job on that end, I can tell you for sure.
Well, thank you. And we work hard at it, and it's not been easy. Just to throw some more numbers out there, we had a pilot recruiting staff of about 18 pre-COVID. And of course, COVID created a lot of pressure on our business, and we took our staff down to 5. And now we've had to, post-COVID now ramp it back up to about 20. So, there's been a lot of contraction and now expansion in our capabilities as an airline, but certainly in pilot hiring. So, we're running fast to get back up to speed on the treadmill and doing events and making sure that we're accessible to people and our program's understandable. So I'm glad that there's good awareness up at UND, and it's a great partner.
Mm-hmm. So as you think, maybe we're kind of pretty squarely into the recovery, and we're starting to see more routes coming back, capacity coming back, planes coming in. What are some of your long-term goals for the Aviate program that you can share today that you're thinking about?
Yeah. So, loosely speaking, we have a long-term goal of Aviate being the primary way to get to United Airlines. We really, really embrace and appreciate the notion of choosing high potential people early on, and then guiding them and flying in formation with them through their developments. And we do that with coaching, with mentoring, but we call it coaching. Our coaching program, so they get paired one-on-one with the United pilots. So aspirationally, we would like our hiring at United, which we've said is going to be at least 10,000 in the next 10 years. We are migrating towards making that predominantly through our Aviate pipeline. because we really feel good about our ability to select talent early, develop it, and kind of unitize people early on and make sure that fit is good, and that people are, poised for and prepared for success at United Airlines. So overall growth, without a doubt. We mean for the program during that growth to embrace a really large population, right? A wide, broad population, whether people are going through a vocational development track or through a university development track. We want to embrace lots of different entry points, so people have choices. And then also that embrace that we're doing is all about diversity. My boss, the senior vice president of flight operations, would say our demand for pilots is so high, we just can't afford to overlook diversity, right? Like the numbers just wouldn't be big enough. And more than that, it's just the right thing to do, right? We ought to have a demographic in the cockpit that looks like the demographic that we have in other areas of our company. And we have a very, very diverse company, but the cockpit is lagging behind in diversity. My dad was a United captain. I'm a United captain. My son is on his way to United. And I sometimes point that out as being great, but it's also a bit of a flaw in the system. It shouldn't be that you have to be born into it to end up in the cockpit, right? So we're trying to open up the aperture of opportunity, and we do that by breaking down barriers to entry. One of them is what you're asking me about. How do I do it, right? What does it mean? How do I get there? It's kind of the psychic barrier. The other is financial, and we're trying to work on the financial barriers to entry also.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned that, there a lot of us maybe were a little bit disheartened at some of the public pushback and some of the statements around your diversity and inclusion goals. What would you say to people who are maybe stuck in this mindset that you're going to prioritize people over safety and suddenly United is going to delve into some kind of weird tailspin?
Yeah. Yeah. So I love the question because I like to answer it because people misunderstand sometimes the commitment. If the commitment was at the cockpit door, there would be some validity to the critique that they're giving us. So in other words, if we said through this cockpit door tomorrow, we'll walk 50% diversity, which is our commitment, that we've committed to 50% women and people of color. And if we tried to do that tomorrow, we would have to have varying standards, or it would lead us to varying standards. We're not doing that. That's not our commitment. Our commitment is 50% diversity or more at our academy at the entry point into the industry. And we've succeeded wildly at that. We well understated our capabilities by saying 50%, because as people can imagine, if you group women and people of color, in the population, it's more like 70 or 75%. And that's exactly what we're achieving in our applicant pool. So if our applicant pool looks like the community, that's wonderful, right? And now we apply our single high standards to our selection tools. And the fact that we have over 8,000 applicants means we have a much bigger pool against which to apply a very, very selective set of tools. And those tools are video interviews, aptitude testing, some knowledge evaluation, et cetera, that we do to select people into the academy. So to the people that would be uneasy, once they understand that what we're talking about is attracting people into a point that requires no piloting qualifications and then training people based on their capabilities to a single high standard, I think the resistance just falls away because there's no validity to it. We're really happy to be able to say that with a pool of over 8,000 applicants, we can be more selective than we would be if that pool was narrower and less demographically diverse.
Absolutely, yeah. That's been a really good testament, I think, to the amount of applicants and the successes that you've mentioned. What are some ways that you're actually interacting with people to get them to recognize that piloting is a career option that they might not have even thought about before?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and we're spending a bit of time on it. So, clearly the young generations now have a little bit different approach to their understanding of events and news and opportunities. So we are trying to reach out through, our social media channel, and it has an enormous number of followers, as well as the website, which allows people to subscribe, and then we can reach out directly to them with communications. But on top of that, this goes right to the top. Scott Kirby talks about Aviate all the time and the opportunities that we're providing. We have scholarships, and it provides us a platform to talk to a lot of different populations. So we're working very collaboratively with diversity organizations that have their own outreach and their populations that they can speak to. And we're distributing cash and benefits and advantage to people who are interested. So I think the answer is multiple platforms, embracing the ones that are kind of more modern and new age relative to the young people that we're trying to attract. And then just keeping the message consistent top to bottom within our organization. And you'll hear it all the time from Scott Kirby and from our leaders below him. So just, dedicated and thank you for this opportunity. This is the kind of thing that can persuade people and inform people. So we appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up, the first job I ever wanted to do in my life was be a pilot. Turns out I have vertigo, so that isn't going to fly.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I completely understand. Absolutely. One thing I think that's really interesting though is, I got really experienced with aviation at a young age just because of where I was geographically. And I've, kind of been following up on what United has been doing since I find Aviate to be incredible. And I noticed a recent partnership with the Houston ISD, where you're bringing some mentorship and some aviation, strategies into local high schools and career development programs. And I thought to myself, that's like a really early age to start to interact with people.
Yeah.
So I guess a two-part question for you is, how are you thinking about those kinds of programs, and how important are those investments really into, securing your pilot pools?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that we're doing because we feel really energized by having a great social purpose. We have enough pilots applying to United Airlines. We don't feel a shortage at United Airlines. We have an enormous demand. And so what we're really doing is trying to take that opportunity and project it into places where we can really change lives, right? And if you want to change lives, you really want to start early. And that's why more and more we're going to start cracking into the high schools, right, at the younger ages. We are exclusive partners to EAA, the Experimental Aircraft Association. EAA has just a wonderful youth education program, and they're building it even more with Aero Educate. But youngsters, young people from age 8 to 17 can join EAA and get a free flight, a free logbook, a free private pilot test kit, free membership to the organization. Like, that's wonderful. That really helps us to break down barriers to entry at a young age. And I think that most people that end up as professional pilots acquired the energy towards it when they were 8 or 10 or 12. Like, that's when it manifests itself. And we have so many pilots at United that tell stories of, the day that I came into the cockpit and the pilot talked to me, I was 6 or I was 8. We post pictures of it all the time. A picture of someone who was 8 years old in the cockpit, and now here they are at age 28, and they're a pilot for us. So it really is the young age that energizes people, and we mean to bring it to them then. And so that's why more and more of the high schools like Sterling High down in Houston, which I visited recently, we're reaching out to try to bring these opportunities to them and partner with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to turn to talk a little bit more about the pilot profession as is. In many ways, COVID has changed the industry, some for better, some for worse. In what ways has the pilot profession changed? I feel like we haven't necessarily heard too much about what it's like being a pilot now into the recovery and coming out of COVID.
Yeah, so I'd say there's probably two dimensions that jump out at me. So one is the protocols. So without a doubt, we've adopted a lot of cleanliness protocols to make sure that we're all safe, right? The pilots, the employees, and our customers. So we clean the airplanes, we have protocols in the cockpit. Obviously, we're wearing masks when we're in public spaces, et cetera. So the protocols are one aspect that's changed the job. And I think some of those will be durable and will stay with us, just like security at points in our development became more important and it has stuck with us. So that's one thing, and it influences our layovers. There's, the cities are just gradually opening up now. In Australia, we're now able to go outside the hotel, right? So little by little, and every country is different, but we've had a number of countries that have been closed. We've had countries that we can go to as pilots where we have to stay in the hotel. And, that's obviously affected the job in the short term. That will open up and we'll recover from that. But the other dimension on which things have changed, but it's, in the context of history, it's probably not as big a change as it seems, is the uncertainty, right? We had an enormous valley here in terms of the opportunity and the stability of the pilot profession. But for those of us that have been in it for a long time, I've been at United for 34 years, we've had ups and downs, big ones, where we've had furloughs and we've had economic downturns. And the airlines have always, since the 60s, been very, very vulnerable to the economic cycles. And that's never going to change. The pandemic was a new one, right? We hadn't had that before, but we've had other new events. And so the advice that I always give young people is this is a wonderful career. It's a wonderful time to enter, but have a backup plan. I think it's really important to have a backup plan for a lot of reasons, but and education is really important. It's something that can never be taken away, and that's your basis and your foundation for future opportunities. So education is important. And then to the degree that people want to do something remunerative on the side, the airline job is one that actually provides that kind of flexibility. You can do things on the side and make money on the side. Early in your career, there's a bit of vulnerability. It's really good advice to live fairly conservatively, because as your junior, if there is a downturn, you may get furloughed. That has happened throughout the last 40 years. So the job has some uncertainty, but guess what? So does every other job, right? They just take different forms. So this is an uncertainty that I think can be mitigated, to use the aviation term. It can be mitigated by having a backup plan and education, by being fiscally conservative. It points out a vulnerability, some cyclicality to the business, but it's one that I don't think diminishes the value proposition.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I think, also forget that United had a really innovative deal with pilots early on. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you had any furloughs of pilots or any kind of even that stress or consideration.
That's right. And it's important to remember that, because in two ways here also. Number one, we reached a collaborative deal with the pilots, with the union, with our Airline Pilots Association union, such that the company was able to flex down the flying we were doing, which we had to do. And the pilots kind of spread the pain in terms of taking a little less in pay so that we could preserve the integrity and keep everybody employed. So we worked collaboratively to do that. And I think going forward, if Scott Kirby was on, he'd say that we're very interested in making sure that we have some variabilization of our cost structure, so that when we do have downturns, we can bring the costs down and have the least possible impact on our labor groups, to include the pilots. So, we got through this worst of all crisis that we've ever had without furloughing any pilots, and people were still able to, put groceries on the table. So that's one thing. The other thing is, the ups and downs, create some turmoil in our feeders, in our regional network. So as an example, ExpressJet went out of business, or stopped flying. ExpressJet stopped flying. Every single pilot there that was in Aviate, we followed them, tracked them, and kept them engaged, and they have found other jobs, and we have protected them in the program, and they're all coming to United. If this is where they want to be, we gave them the flexibility in the program, and we aided them getting to other, alternative careers, or not careers, but jobs on their way to their career with United. So the Aviate program, we really focused on the people that had some hardship. We had a policy we passed called downsizing separation. So if people were involuntarily downsized or separated, we gave them a lot of liberty in the program. And now that we're back on track, we're sweeping them back in, and many of them are now coming to United. So the pilots at United, the pilots in Aviate, we've really done our best to take care of our family, and we consider it all family.
Yeah. So you just have a couple minutes left. So the last question I want to ask you is, our readership, at least people who are going to be watching this, there are going to be a large number of people who are also trying to get involved in this industry, who maybe don't have access to a lot of the mentors, who maybe don't really understand what your role entails or how they even get to a place that you're at. So I want to take this a little more generally. You've been answering this question a little bit here and there, so I want to kind of put it into one answer. What would you say to maybe a 14, 15, 16-year-old or 20, 25-year-old who's saying, I really want to be a pilot. I passed the basic qualifications. Maybe I have a private certificate already, and they're really considering going into this career. What would you tell them if they came to you and asked for advice?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to seek such advice. So, the good thing is young people these days are so able to kind of drill in on the internet and find good resources. So definitely do that. And what I say to people is, listen to everyone and believe no one. And that doesn't mean that they're fibbing to you, but what that means is you have to synthesize your own answer. So listen to everyone, take all that information, and start concluding what your best path is, what the best thing for you is. And there's some big decisions to make. Do I go to a college like a UND, or do I go to ATP and learn to fly first? Those are some big decisions. And you need to first understand those are decisions that are in front of you that you can make and kind of what the portfolio of options are. And then it should be possible to find mentorship, right? The pilot down the street, or somebody in the extended family that or go to organizations. The Experimental Aircraft Association is everywhere. It's in every state. It's not far away. Google on EAA, getting involved in a chapter, the Young Eagles program. So get yourself into some of these affinity groups where you can start to collect up more information and more guidance, because there are so many airline pilots, tens of thousands of us out, and we're contributing and we're trying to help support. And I go into my kids' schools and I give talks, and most pilots do. So seek out those kinds of people that can give you guidance. So consume all the information you can and then try to forge your own path. And we'll do the best we can at United to demystify. And that's what we try to do a lot. We're going to try to demystify it. We know that it can be a little daunting sometimes to figure out how to get here. But come to our website and consume what we put out for you also.
Great. Well, thank you very much.